Richard Crossley, our speaker tonight, is best known for the iconoclastic field guides which bear his name. The Crossley ID guides are youth-focused, photo-packed handbooks oriented more to what birds are actively seen in the field rather than detailed text. They contain individual color plates for hundreds of species, photoshopped with thousands of images into rich collages set in typical habitats for each species. This allows kids, beginners, and intermediate birders a better understanding of the lives and looks of birds. The Crossley ID Guide Waterfowl was Richard's fifth book after his initial ones on shorebirds, eastern birds USA, raptors, and Britain and Ireland. And now, hot off the press, is a new one, his latest, on western birds, which is just coming out within the next few days. So this will be an announcement, first announcement of his latest work. Richard entered the guidebook game after 20 years working in the business world and raising two children with his wife, Deborah. At the turn of the millennium, he says he was inspired by one of his frequent midlife crises to, quote, spend less time obsessively birding and to focus on paying it forward. The result was co-authorship of his first book, The Shorebird Guide, in 2006. His new obsession became digital tech and innovative book design to share his love for birds and connect people to, quote, a fuller appreciation and understanding of nature and its benefits to mind, body, and soul. Richard is co-founder of the global birding initiative Pledge to Fledge, Race for Birds, and the Cape May Young Birding Club. He has also served on the board of directors of the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary in Pennsylvania. Richard is now living an hour north of Los Angeles in great birding territory, he says. As far as his books are concerned, if you're interested in obtaining some of Richard's books, you can do so by going to his website, crossleybooks.com, and ordering from there. And he would be glad to send you a signed copy. There'll be more about Richard's books, obtaining Richard's books later in the program. Richard was going to talk tonight about his 16,000-mile trip to the Arctic. Richard, we're pleased to have you as our speaker tonight. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I wish I was there in person, I have to say, looking at some chickens as well, you know, but it is what it is. I was meant to be in Colorado for the whole month of April, so I'm not a big fan of COVID. So I've got to go birding around here, which I have to say is pretty special. So we're finding lots of new things, new places, and it's really exciting. So I feel like I'm in a kid in a candy store again. But as you mentioned, Bill, it was around 40, I had my first midlife crisis. I've had a lot of midlife crises since then. Thankfully, midlife goes up to 60, so I'm still squeezing it in. But as you mentioned, I've done multiple books, but I get into a lot of hate mail because I'm not getting the Western Guide out. So as you said, you got an exclusive. The Western Guide is going to be out probably on this Friday, as well as Ornithotherapy for your mind, body, and soul, which I hope will be a game changer and connect more people to birds. But about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big question. Should I do the Waterfowl Guide or the Western Guide? Which one should I finish first? And so I decided to finish the Waterfowl Guide. And the reason is because it was different. The Western Guide was another Eastern Guide, but one of my goals or one of my dreams in life was to connect people. And so in America, we have the hunters, the fishermen, the photographers, the birders, so many different groups that really don't work together very well. And so one of my dreams was particularly to bring the hunters into the same game as the birders. After all, we all love going out in nature. We just use different tools. And it's quite possible that I would have been a hunter if I'd been brought up in America. In England, no hunting. It's all hunting for birds with binoculars, scopes, and cameras. In any case, I was driving down the road only a few miles from the home, and it was, which one do I do? And it hit me like a bolt. You see, I had a problem. I needed lots more photos. I needed to create relationships with Ducks Unlimited and some of these big organizations I wasn't familiar with. But, you know, most of the photos I really needed were up in the tundra in the Arctic. And there's only one road that goes to the Arctic Ocean, and that's from Fairbanks, Alaska, up to Prudhoe Bay. So, you know, it sort of hit me like a bolt. You know, all I had to do was drive across America. I could meet all these different organizations, go up to Alaska and drive up this logging tracker. I think it was 800 miles or something, up to Prudhoe Bay, get all the tundra shots and the photos I didn't have, and it'd be that simple. So if you do go all excited, put it on social media, right? Facebook, Instagram, all the rest, and it's too bloody late at that point to go back. So it was done. I was driving all the way to get these birds, and it was funny because I'd just come back from Egypt, and you might be saying, what does Egypt have to do with it? Well, my daughter comes into the room and she says, Dad, you know, how far is it to Egypt from me? I'm like, I have no clue, Sammy. Why didn't you tell me? You know, go on the internet. And I goes, how far is it? She goes, it's 5,600 miles. I'm like, wow. I was like, Sam, why are you at it? How far is it from here to Prudhoe Bay? She goes, it's 5,300 miles. I'm like, bloody hell, I'm driving to Egypt. In any case, it was too late, and so off it was. And so one of the things I love is change. I love not knowing about things. So discovery is everything. And obviously one of my favorite quotes from Winnie is, to improve is to change. To be perfect is to change a lot. And so I love change. In any case, so that was it. I was driving basically to Egypt. Luckily, I was going in a car, not with camels. But one of the things was to listen to people. And so really, we're not very good at listening as a rule. And so I was actually, not long before this, I was actually only half a mile from my house, and I pulled over to photograph this beautiful old tree for books. And some bloke comes out, African-American guy, and he says, what are you doing? I'm thinking, well, am I parked in his driveway or something? I goes, I'm taking a photo of this tree to put in books that I do. And he goes, oh, that's fascinating. Come on inside. And so I said, okay. So I go inside, and he asked me some more questions, and he says, well, actually, I was silent for 17 years, and I worked for National Geographic. I'm like, you work for National Geographic and you live half a mile from me? I'm like, can't be. And what do you mean, right? The obvious question, what do you mean you were silent? He goes, well, I didn't speak to anybody for 17 years. I'm like, get out of here. So he starts to tell me how he was in San Francisco. He decided to go quiet for 24 hours. And when he stopped talking, he suddenly realized he started listening and started hearing things he hadn't heard before. And so he did it for a week and then a month. And then he started walking. You know, he wanted to be a conscientious, he's pro the environment. So he started walking further through America, then down through South America. And so I went home, Googled him. Holy mackerel, half a mile from my home was this guy, the planet walker, who was 17 years silent. And so I'm not advocating be 17 years silent, but it's very, very good to listen, not only locally, but around the world. It's amazing what we can learn. In any case, I was off, and I overstay in fancy places, 5-star hotels. So this one is my old Honda Pilot, which I actually still have parked outside. Great vehicle. And so not only a great place to sleep, but also store all your stuff in plastic containers. And it's a great place to take photographs from. And so again, fancy places, the type of place that tells you where to do a number 1 and a number 2. In any case, I left my beloved Cape May in May. I've forgotten what year it was. So I'm going to tell you this story as we travel across the country from east to west and then up to the north. And of course, waterfowl are different to any other group. I loved waterfowl before, but quite hard to in a couple of years really diving really deep into waterfowl. They're quite possibly my favorite group now. They're incredible and they're really different. One of the things that is really different is their bright plumage is actually in winter, and their grungy plumage, female-like plumage, is actually in summer. We call it eclipse. So many of these birds are not actually females, but adult females. So I decided to do a summer scene where the birds would be in eclipse with the ducklings, of course, and in habitat. This is actually Chicago, places where everybody lives. So, you know, we want to create a connection with people. I've known some people say, you can't put birds in cities. Of course we can. That's where most people live. 82% of America lives in cities and suburbs. So it's very important we connect people. And then also not only winter and summer, but we also want to get people to understand what they're looking at. So if I asked you what color a male mallard's head is, most people would say it's green. Well, it's only green when it's backlit. If you look directly into the sun, it's always purple or black. And if you look at 90 degrees to the right or left, it's going to be a mosaic of colors, sometimes green, blue, purple, or black. And so if you look at these wings lower left, that's all the same bird, a second apart. 3 images all taken within 1 second. Look at the different colors. So iridescence, light blue, dark blue, purple blue. And so colors, as I always tell people in bird identification, is the root of all evil. Last thing to use is color. It's like identifying me from my color. I was a little whiter before. I'm a rosy now. The light's making a difference. And when I have a couple of scotches afterwards, I'm going to be really dark red. So my colors are always changing, like my clothes. But my size, my shape, my crazy waving of hands, my voice is always the same. Birds are just the same. And of course, it was the first book that I self-published. So if you're going to self-publish, what sells? Sex sells. So I put some sex in there, right? Okay, so would you believe they have the most incredible mating scenes? The female, remarkably, is actually in control. Different to what they say on the internet. She's very naughty, actually. So she actually goes off and runs off with different males when she's incubated, when she has to get another egg fertilized. And all the males are always chasing the girls around. They have, as I said, incredible sex lives. This mallard has a 9-inch member, would you believe it? But it only lasts for 3/4 of a second. So, well, you can do the mathematics on that one. And of course, you want to show birds how they land, how they fly, so we can slow things down. See, for me, everything is about understanding. It's not about names. It's not about lists. It's about understanding and being able to analyze what you see. It's not about the answer. It's about knowing the right questions to ask. If you think of the right questions, it opens up an incredible world of discovery. And for me, that's what I love. That's why I went into birds at a very young age. I had a chance to be and go into professional sports, soccer and cricket. I chose birding because it's 24 hours a day and there's so much to learn wherever you go around the world. So fantastic. One of the best choices I ever made. And so as you go across the country through Pennsylvania, the first thing that strikes is just thousands of miles of forest and almost no birds. If you go into any part of that forest, all you see is loads of warblers. So I always wonder, are the birds really in such dire straits? The biggest migrations of warblers that I've seen in Cape May the biggest 2 flights have actually been in the last few years. One by multiples of probably 5 or 6 bigger than any other flight. So it's not all doom and gloom. And of course, as you're going through the forest, you see these beautiful rivers. And in the rivers, if you get lucky, are common mergansers, or what we call gooseanders in Europe. Okay, so the males on the rock, you see the big white wing patches? Those are males looking like females in summer. Always look at the bill and the wing pattern. That'll tell you whether the males or females. Eye colors as well. And so one of the things I've always hated about books, we tend to show them in the brightest plumage and the dullest plumage. And of course, that only confuses people. So it's very important we show people the big picture. And so you can see everything, so you make sense of it. So suddenly when you see a bird like sitting on the log that's half brown and half bright, like a bright adult male, suddenly it makes sense. We always show birds going to bed one way and waking up the next. And of course we do this for kids. We dumb these books down and show them little partial pictures of what reality is. No wonder they are completely confused. We have to change this in books, in schools and things like that. Important to show people the big picture so they can understand. The minutiae comes later. The big picture comes first. And of course, we always want to celebrate the beauty of them. Common mergansers are one of my favorites. And so aging and sexing, people think my book's called, because they're called ID guides, it's about IDing names. It is not. It is about IDing behavior, IDing habitats, IDing ages, IDing sexes. Everything is identification. And so that's the fun part of it. And so my books are intended to be a halfway house between reality and the old school field guides. And so they were really misunderstood and still are. So hopefully as the days goes on, a decade later, they'll be better understood. Of course, winter scene, summer scene, and then we do a double page scene of birds in flight. I mean, after all, we see birds in flight a lot more than we do sitting down. And again, every age and sex in there. And of course, I've left some of the text off, this text underneath the plates. Why? Because now you have to buy it, right? And of course, you don't get better by just reading. You don't get better until you put yourself on the spot. And so from all my books, I've always had mystery photos. It's not until you actually try and work out things for yourself that you get better. Most people are absolutely scared of trying because it's human nature. We try 3, 4, 5 times and we jack it in because we don't want to feel like failures. The best birders love not knowing. So if you're intimidated by looking yourself and trying to work out the answer, try and change that. But don't try and put a name on the bird. ID the other things. ID its behavior. ID where it lives. ID whether you've seen it before. ID its flock formations. ID how it flies. I came to this country, the books were so bad, I looked at the sparrows every single day for 6 weeks, knew these sparrows inside and out, but I didn't put a name on it. I can tell you the variation of song sparrows so well, but it took 6 weeks to put a name on it. But of course, I knew the bird. I just didn't know the name. And of course, you do that with people. I'm not interested in people's names. I'm interested in learning about people, what their life stories are, what they do for a profession, what do they find exciting. If I learn all those things, then I'll be interested in the name. Same with birds. And of course, mystery photos here. So birds, mystery photos, it's not just when they're flying, whatever, it's when they're sitting, but with the heads tucked in. So size is a big clue. So all my images are right down to the size, so you can see the subtle differences in sizes and shapes and help you focus on the things that other books don't show you. And if not, just enjoy the beauty of the scenery. And of course, nothing in nature is by life. So a bird's size, its shape, its behavior, its patterns of color are all linked to how and where it lives. Everything is connected. So when you look at a wood duck, look at these crazy, beautiful colors. I mean, they're so bright, they're going to stand out, right? Wrong. In where they live, in dense woodlands, in wet pools, they stick in there beautifully. And again, nothing is by accident. So wood ducks, if you see them in flight and you look closely, they fly different, but they also have long tails. Why do they have long tails? Well, let's think about it. What other birds live in woodlands that have long tails? So let's think of raptors. So sharp-shinned hawk, Cooper's hawks, they live in woodlands and they have long tails and shorter wings. Why? Those tails are rudders for steering through the trees, just like the wood duck is. So again, if you think of behavior in really all birds transcends all the groups, transcends all the different continents around the world. So if you learn those patterns, birding becomes a lot easier and exciting. And wood ducks, again, you've probably all seen how the leap of faith, how the ducklings jump 70, 80 foot out of a tree, flutter down to the ground, designed to bounce like babies for us as well, hence the soft skulls. So yeah, just fantastic things. The more we know about nature, the more of a miracle it is. Of course, Canada geese, nobody really knows about them, but funnily enough, lesser Canada goose, I came to Denver twice actually to look at lesser Canada geese. And so I talked to some of the guys there. I could never find them. The reason is there is no such thing as lesser Canada goose. And you'll have to buy the book, but the reason is I started talking to the people in Alaska who was doing all the research. And it's quite interesting how if something gets off on the wrong foot, it goes down the slippery track. You look at the first guides, it shows this thing, parvopees, lesser Canada goose, all of northern North America. And yet when you ask, you'll find out there is no proven record of lesser Canada goose breeding in Canada. So the only DNA records are from Alaska. And of course, there's this confusing dark Anchorage goose up there, which is the proper lesser Canada goose. So all the Canada goose you get in the Denver area are actually probably just interior Canada goose. So really fascinating. Birding really is in its infancy. But more important than that, that's the high end, is really understanding. So how a bird grows up from being in an egg and popping out, and how the feathers change. So on the lower right, you can see the shafts of the Canada goose, how the feathers sort of grow out through the shafts. So once you understand everything, it all sort of makes more sense. And you'd be shocked how few people do. And I often hear the word bandied around, expert. I'm not sure I actually know an expert. I'm certainly not an expert, but it's an overbanded word, because really where birding is really absolutely in its infancy. And so we can all learn things every day that are new, basically new to science. And so it was, as I got across, one of my main targets was to meet Ducks Unlimited in Winnipeg. And so Canada's a sort of a halfway house, right, between Europe and England and America. So sort of biased both sides. So immediately kilometers, where are the miles? And so as you get there, it made me think of my upbringing. Where do I come from? You know, Canada wasn't going home, but it brought back memories, not least because they have the best chocolate in the world. It's just the same as England. So if you go to Canada, you got to dive into Crunchies and Mars bars and proper Cadbury's Dairy Milk. Oh, it's the best. In any case, so I grew up on a farm, and I'm sure that's where my love of the countryside began. And when I was 7 years old, I started collecting eggs like my dad had done and his dad had done, a tradition. But it was from that, I just loved being outside. But he gave me my dad gave a very strong conservation message. Although collecting eggs is really bad. He says, Richard, you go into the nest really quick. You only take one egg because you don't want to disturb the clutch, and you get straight back out again. So although egg collecting is bad, I was always growing up with a strong conservation message. But also it made me think about England. England is very different. It's a hotbed of birding. And so in the 60s and 70s, it's a male-dominated sport. It's not a hobby. And you could argue it's not even a sport, it's life. I personally know 13 guys who have died birding, all sorts of stuff, you know. And so I was one of those crazy psychos. But in the 80s, it got even more popular. And actually, even in America today, American Bird Conservancy, even Cornell, are run by English people. Why? Most of them from this hotbed of birding in the 80s. And in the 90s and early 2000s, what it looked like. Again, you can see no women. But today there are more women, but actually women make up a larger population of birders than men. It's only the extreme whack jobs like me that do the crazy stuff. Running around the world and risking life and limb, you know. So this is the scene. Today, birding in America is probably a 6 to 10 times smaller than in England. The RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, has nearly 1.2 million members. That's the equivalent of 6 million members over here. So it's massive. The National Trust has 10% of the population is a member. So that would be the equivalent of a membership of 30 million over here. So the potential for us is great. And as I often tell people, the only difference between America and England in this is this. In England, there are very few birds. You can't get remotely close to them. They're all dingy and grey and almost impossible to identify. It's always raining. No sports clubs are named after birds. But other than that, everything's the same. The point being is we have every advantage. We don't connect to nature as well as what we could be doing. And so it's important that we learn from other countries to see what they're doing to connect to nature better than what we are. I came to America for the first time when I was from 21 to 27, traveled all over the world, always loved being around young people. Why? Because I feel like I'm still young and stupid. Young means I'm still excited. I'm still desperate to go out. I'm looking at my feed and I'm talking to you. Shouldn't tell you that, still light over here. And I'm stupid because I know nothing, absolutely nothing. And once I think I have the answers, you can stick me 6 foot under. It's that knowing discovery that excites me. And of course, I like doing everything differently. I was not a photographer. I had to become a photographer for the shorebird guide. Everybody was using film flash and tripods. Seems stupid to me when you're following a bird flying at 30 miles per hour. What the heck is a tripod doing? And film flash is just a lie. I wanted to show reality, what I see in the real world. Now, obviously, those lenses are taking its toll. I was about 6'4" when I started. I'm closer to 5 foot now. Just big, heavy lens. Thank goodness for the smaller lenses of today. So I cheat a bit. In any case, I made the Crossley ID guide after the shorebird guide. The shorebird guide was very popular, but it was wrong. It was wrong because it was not lifelike. Photographs taken with big or medium-sized lenses are not lifelike. They are not what we see in the real world. Wanted to show what we see in the real world, a halfway house between reality and the old school guide, one that you could practice in, where the birds are not flying away, where you could see the complete picture. And of course, if you want to identify me, or the police wants to identify me because I don't make enough money from virtual talks and I have to go rob a bank, are they going to want a painting or are they going to want a photograph? Are you kidding me? You know the answer. You see a photograph and you say, that's him. Paintings, I think that's him. We have to change to that. And so the Eastern Guide came out, cost me $250,000, took 6 years, 11,000 of my images in there. I think 80 images from other people, so 99.9% of the images. I never understood it, how you could use other people's images and then put your name on the book. And of course, I wanted photos that were not great photos for artistic merit, but were actual representations of what we see in reality: size, shape, patterns of color, etc., behaviors that captured the essence of the bird. Now, of course, this book was not possible until the advent of Photoshop and digital photography. And let me tell you, those two things make everything possible. Okay, ladies, good thing about virtual, no ladies coming on the stage or anything like that. Okay, so in any case, breeding, non-breeding plumage, right? People, as in birds, just the same. In a guide. Mine is not a field guide. Some people pointed out it was too big into the field, like I'd missed it. Coming from England, if you took a guide into the field, it was over. It was not allowed. You were out of the fraternity. Real birders never take a guide in the field. They take a notebook and look at the birds. A bird is reality. Books are not. Okay, so what is the purpose of the book? Other books are really designed to give some birds a quick fix answer so you can tick them. Mine was not designed to do that. It was designed to teach you to be better birders, to empower you so when you went out into nature, you felt more comfortable. You knew what to look for, the habitats, the behaviors, the flock formations. And of course, you could practice in my book because practice makes perfect. Repetition is the key to learning. Unless you do it again and again and again, and unless you fail, you are never going to become good at it. That's just reality. So you can do that in the books. And again, the lifelike. So that was the purpose of my book. So very different. So to make you a better birdist. So what was different about the book? Everything was different. And so, as I've said before, habitat is key to everything. It determines a bird's size, shape, and behaviors and patterns of color. And so a few of the top birders got together. And so we decided not to do it by taxonomy, because taxonomy has changed since this talk began, but actually do it by habitat. And so it makes more sense to all birders, so he's a wetland bird, a shore bird, so flying water birds, etc., etc. In any case, you know the drill. And so we also did alpha codes, the first book to do alpha codes. And so obviously that's become standard stuff. I hate the bloody things, okay? But if we're in the 21st century, it needed to be a 21st century book. And so again, very simple. Everything in focus, just as I see as I look out the window. It's lifelike, where the ability to practice was so much more information that was in other guides. And that has been the problem. This was too much of a quantum leap from Peterson and Sibley to this. People did not know how to interpret the information. At first, found it confusing. Where are the arrows? Where are the answers? In nature, there are no arrows, there are no answers, and there are no white snowy backgrounds. Okay, so that's why people are struggling. So Peterson was the most incredible naturalist of the last century, but nearly 100 years on, it's time to move on and get into the 21st century. Raptors, an extension of the Eastern Guide, but we could do a lot more, show a lot more behavior, how birds were living, because we're all voyeurs. People are voyeurs of other people, but we want people to be voyeurs of nature, to understand their lifestyles, to embrace, enjoy, be in love with their lifestyles. If you're really in love with them, then you want to conserve it. Then you want to be with them more often. And of course, mystery photos. So I'm sure you can all see the Swainson's hawks in there. If you can't, well, obviously, you're going to have to buy the book, right? But in any case, patterns, behavior. What birds are in so many such big flocks? Only broad-winged hawks, but beginners don't know that. So it's important to show that. And of course, I always tell people, as I did before, color is the root of all evil. Try and see birds in shades of gray. Okay, in black and white. And so once you can do that and you take the color out of the equation, birding actually becomes a lot easier. And so the Waterfowl guide was to use a lot of these things, but also try and connect birders with hunters. And so the Western guide went to the dogs. And of course, everybody complained that the Eastern guide was too big. So I'm sorry, I copped out. I did a little folding pocket guide so you could stick it in your book. I got American and commercial. What are you going to do? In any case, as we're in, went up to see Ducks Unlimited Canada. Now, being from England, we hate duck hunters. We hate any hunters. In fact, we hate guns. We don't believe in them, right? And so I was a little scared going up there. I didn't know what to expect. Didn't really know as much about Ducks Unlimited as I should have done. After all, I'm a birder, and it became very clear in the 20 years of living here, very few birders understood about Ducks Unlimited and what their mission was. And so straight away, I was struck by all the different things. It was about birds, bird census, Canada's best ecotourism experience. Nothing about hunting. So I was a little bemused. And when I went inside, checklist and everything, all birds, but nothing about hunting. But there was something about the passion, all the hunters that I really hadn't seen in birders. Tattoos, they would die for it, like the English birders. And so I went in there really not knowing what to think, but I've spent nearly all day in there. And when I came out, I was like high as a kite, completely invigorated, because it was nothing about hunting. It was all about conservation and how they were saving the wetlands and getting the numbers up and that. Completely different to what I'd heard actually within the birding communities. And so I left, and they said, though, of all the birders, there's one hunter called Pat Keogh lived in Edmonton. I needed to go and see him because he was sort of a bit like me, a bit psycho, a bit crazy, and I would enjoy his company and would learn a lot from him. So I was going to go over to Edmonton and see Pat. And along the way, across the incredible prairies, were all these little potholes, just incredible, just insane. I love wide open spaces. And I remember going to this one pond where there was nothing on it. And then after a few minutes, a ruddy duck came out, and another, and another. And all of a sudden, this thing just started. The females started fighting over males. I mean, vicious, hitting each other, pecking each other. The males were there, banging on the water, bubbles coming up everywhere. You know, both males and females running across the water, charging one another. It was just absolute mayhem. And so I had places to go, so I could only stay there for 5 hours. It was incredible. But, you know, sitting down, watching, so good. Cinnamon, teal, and again, just watching the females. A lot of the males skedaddle, right? And so most of the males do what I think like warblers and other things do. So they go, have their evil way, and then when the young come along, they all head north to molt, right? And so they go north. Why? Because that's where the food is. My sense is a lot of warblers do the same thing. It's very easy to birds to fly a couple 100 miles, but to find the food, not so easy. So birds travel around the world. Why? To get to as far north as they can, because the further north you go in July, the more food there is. So I think with all the technology today, that's going to be a fascinating thing. But leaving behind, they would see all the females and how they would all mix together. Just fantastic. I'm sure living in Colorado, you do see some of this. Brilliant. And of course, the book was for fishermen and hunters and everybody else. So I put other plates in there to try and appeal to a larger cross-section of people. We're all the same. We just use different tools to be out in nature. So not only water birds, but also passerines and things like that, the birds that you would see. In any case, this is actually Calgary, not Edmonton, but I met this demure, quiet, easygoing, laid-back Pat Keogh. Obviously, is a little bit the opposite of that. Crazy guy. But he's taken away. I spent like 3 hours in his office that afternoon, and the next day he rocked my world. He took me all around Edmonton within about 30-mile radius. He knew every single farmer. He told me what they'd done on every farm, about how their Ducks Unlimited would give up to a couple of $1 million a year to Calgary University to grow better strands of winter wheat. Why? Because spring wheat, the vegetation looks something like this. So foxes, coyotes go down the ditches, just nick the chicks and the eggs. Plant winter wheat, the fields are much taller like this. So the ducks do not breed in wetlands as a rule, they breed in the farm fields. So if there's cover, they're protected. Coyotes, foxes can't get them. In any case, Pat told me a million things, but it's like we should be joining forces with Ducks Unlimited because they do a remarkable job. In any case, I learned a lot more about DU since then, not only in Canada, but also in the USA. Incredible organization. And again, many other hunting groups do fantastic stuff for conservation. In any case, staying in my fancy hotel, you always keep your camera ready. You have the backup like that. And so if you're there for a few hours, familiarity breeds contempt. So the birds will come up right up to you. And so I would get a lot of photos from my blind, or hide as we call them. But hides are incredible things. We don't have too many in America, which is criminal. Okay, so hides, hunters use them all the time. Why? To get close to nature. Birders should be. We're not supposed to be disturbing nature. When you're in a blind, you don't disturb it. Not only that, you create a fraternity. People want to belong to fraternities. So where they learn from one another, become friends with one another, share stories, right? Which we all like doing. Of course, you can put lots of information on the walls, etc. So we have to do better with blinds. So these are what blinds look like 10 years ago in northern Norway. So again, we're just way behind. So we're 25 years behind when it comes to this stuff. So it's just critical we look around the world and learn from others. So now it's lots of two-way glass. So we should be having purple martins on buildings, right, with two-way glass, so we can see into the nest boxes and see into the lives of these things. Conservation is very small in this country. There are very few birders. We are not connecting people to birders because we do not do the right things to do it. People want to get close and intimate to nature. They don't want to count hundreds of birds. No beginner, intimate, or even lower level birder is interested in that. They want real up close experiences with nature. Just one will do it. And so we must cater to that. It's really important. In any case, I went to the big Saving Wetlands conference maybe 4 years ago, and 2 weeks beforehand, they asked me to open up the ceremony, which 10 minutes speaking about working together. So hopefully we're actually going to start doing that better, but we have a long way to go. But conservation comes with numbers. So we have to do a better job of joining forces, connecting together, not just within North America, but around the world, and learning from others who have been through all the trials and errors and made mistakes and have come through the other side better. So much to learn. But one of the things, these numbers are very common known numbers, but these numbers were not published at the time. And so what was really fascinating is, it's these numbers, that 86 million people are wildlife watchers, 45 or something, 45 million are bird watchers. But if you add all the memberships up in England, in the USA, it doesn't add up to 1 million, which asks you the real question. Where the hell is everybody, and why aren't we connecting to them? And so the habitats, behaviors, and keys, the habitat behavior, right? So if you go to a mountain pond in Colorado or somewhere like that, there's only a few species that you get up there. So we should be showing that. And of course, as you go across North America, just nowhere like it in the world, all the mosaic of habitats, the vast volume of birds, that you can get close to them as well. Just fantastic birding, and the scenery is just second to none. So I always marvel at it, and the scale of everything. One of my favorites as you go up into the Rockies, something all of you folks see, is harlequin duck. Again, in winter, they go lower down, then up in summer, up in the fast flowing streams, and of course in flight. And so I went to Prince Rupert on the west coast, British Columbia, and I felt like I was on the Titanic. I actually went and stood on the front for about 30 seconds and got very rudely pulled back off there, but it was an experience. I didn't take my hands off. In any case, just the scenery going up the west coast offshore, incredible. The goal was to get to Southeast Alaska. So I got off in Southeast Alaska, and you are certainly entering a different time zone. Everything is different, right? Red-breasted mergansers, where do they all breed? Do you know? I don't think we actually know. You go across North America and you never see them in summer. Okay, I know some places where they nest, but I think we need to learn a lot. And of course, every book in the world put, when they have black around the eye, that it's a young male. That is absolutely incorrect. So older females have lots of black around the eye. Only immature females don't have any black around the eye. So all books around the world wrong. So again, just showing birdings in its infancy. But ultimately, it's the behaviors, right? The displaying and things like that is just incredible. And of course, they say the young people are not interested in birds today. That's an absolute crock. That's not true. So we just need to do a better job of connecting to them. This is my oldest daughter, Sophie. She's not a birder, but she does love being out in nature. Now, of course, when she first got there, she flew up to Anchorage to meet me. She wasn't happy, as you can see. But once she got camping, once the phone was turned off and it didn't work, the following week, absolutely loved it. She's been other places to me with since then, Africa, and she's just co-authored Ornithotherapy with myself and Holly Merker. So the three of us had great fun. So Ornithotherapy for your mind, body and soul. The goal is to join to a much broader audience, to show people how to look out the window and understand what they're looking at. Not only understanding how birds live and create connection like that, be in the moment, but actually some introspection, how we look at ourselves is really important. And of course, what is becoming increasingly clear this day and age, the health benefits mentally, physically, emotionally, every single way are really incredible. Even performance in work. Our lunch breaks should be outside connecting to nature. So hopefully ornithotherapy will change a lot of the discussion, and again, bring burden into the 21st world and realize just how important nature is to our health. And of course, so I was feeling my oats after spending all that time with my daughters. So I was going to show you a video, but it doesn't really work, about how I create the pages. But ultimately, it's always about the backgrounds. This is an unusual one because usually the backgrounds are made up of lots of images, not just one. So when a bird's really close, you have to have maybe 6, 7 images to create the background. So a lot of people have tried to copy my books, and they find that out, and they give up after a month or two. So unfortunately, the ID guides will probably never be seen again, which is a sad shame. But in any case, so we bring all sorts of birds in, bring some closer water in, and basically I paint with pixels. That's all I do, paint with pixels, because pixels are lifelike, paint is not, okay? And so I create a mental image of what I want to show, the habitats, the behaviors. And of course, if you're trying to keep people's interest, it's got to be interesting. If a book's closed, nobody's ever going to learn anything. So again, enjoying them and so creating a connection to nature. Valdez, this is Valdez, where the incredible oil spill was many years ago, disastrous. We now know that if we hadn't touched it, nature would have actually corrected it much better and much faster. Same actually in the Gulf of Mexico. So nature is great, but one of the most beautiful places in the world, Valdez, absolutely great. But it's not just about birds, right? So I was in Fairbanks, and so I had some friends there and was able to go looking at some Tangmalm's owls, or what we call over here boreal owls. But it's not a cuddly toy, though it looks like one. And so this is for the main part of my journey, was to drive to Deadhorse or Prudhoe Bay. There are oil refineries right at the Arctic Ocean, but it's the only road where you can drive. And so once you hit this logging track, it's a lot better than that. Only parts of it are not paved. And it was a bit busier than what I expected. You've got to have 2 full-size spare tires, but just incredible driving up there. A little scary, to be honest. And so the next services is 240 miles. So you don't want to break down, you know, and off we sent. But, you know, we often have preconceived ideas of what's right and wrong, but ultimately we always have to ask questions, right? And so one of the things that was very clear was actually wherever there were pipelines, the birds actually liked the infrastructure and there were more birds. That was a bit of a shocker. In any case, perfect hawk owl country. Bound to see loads of them, right? In 800 miles. Didn't see a bloody one. Unbelievable. But in any case, you got to take an opportunity. So thankfully no car washers out there, so a good excuse. Great curtains, right? So I could sleep in the morning, which I actually never did. But again, it's all about learning to look, learning to analyze things so you can see more. Just incredible scenery up there. And of course, I was sort of driving alone. In fact, I wasn't driving alone. I actually had thousands and thousands of friends with me. So even the few signs up there, you would hopefully not have to tell people not to cut a bloody tree down, right? But I guess you have to do. But as I said, lots of friends up there, bloody millions of them. I thought I was immune to mosquitoes until I got up there, and holy mackerel. So Arctic terns and things like that travel around the world, right? Not just Arctic terns, mostly shorebirds travel around the world for things like mosquitoes. Why? Because it's all about the kids. It's all about the future. And so in July, it's just incredible. So before head of hair, so now I've got a big bald spot on top, but lots of friends up there. They would even drive the willow ptarmigans absolutely crazy as well. They're always trying to get rid of them, shake them off. But that's what you do for the kids, right? In any case, got to Deadhorse or Prudhoe Bay, and you go past hundreds of miles of tundra and see very little. Get to Prudhoe Bay and unbelievable birds everywhere, again, because of the infrastructure. Prudhoe Bay, they have their own security. They hate people. They hate non-workers. They hate birders. I met another English guy there. I was living in Latvia. And so we would start birding together, sitting at the side of the road, watching some Stella's Ida. Within minutes, security all was around us. Weren't doing anything wrong. Put cones around us, 20 foot away from us. Absolutely paranoid about somebody getting hurt. If you put 1 foot onto the tundra, you're gone, you're out of there. So the tundra right in Prudhoe Bay is absolutely pristine. Birds, flightless, right? Middle of summer. Snow geese, oh my God, they can run like hell. I mean, they're just, you can't get remotely close to them. They're running before you even see them, you know, with the youngsters. And of course, Hedwig's there, snowy owl. This is not a photoshopped image, seriously. So Hedwig was there to watch them. So lots of birds are white up there. And of course, even the signs. One thing about North America, I always love the signs. We have very few birdie signs in England, but great over here. And then if you look closely as well, you can see the spy bottom right. Did you see that? In any case, no conspiracy theories, please. But in any case, big flocks of geese up there. Okay, all mixed in, and it was one of the things where I was able to look at Canada goose, the actual Anchorage proper lesser Canada goose, and these other things up there, which are supposedly taverners. Still completely confused about all these things, but really, really fascinating. And of course, the behaviors, just waterfowl, the most incredible things to just watch, you know, the iridescent colors of a common goldeneye, but their displays, holy mackerel, look at that, and the funky head shape. And we, you know, they sometimes get it on with barrows. So sometimes they hybridize. Can you see the hybrid in here? And, you know, again, just great stuff up there. And of course, long-tailed duck are old squaw. And so creating an image like this would probably take about 2 days. This is after getting off first. So definitely be quicker to paint the damn things. Okay, but the details. So if you look at the lower left image, you'll see how the tail is actually, it feels like it's soft, it's curved. But the second it dives, it pops and goes absolutely vertical. Can you see the head underneath the water? And then how they swim underwater, almost literally flapping as though they're flying. And of course, the crash landing. Look how the water comes up, bottom right. Look how the water swirls around the head. I love waves and splashing water, right? Does a belly flops, again, to watch how they land with the legs splayed. And of course, long-tailed ducks, they fly in lines. So if you know the flop formation and you know the spacing between the birds, it's a simple clue at any distance. It's these simple clues that are really important. And of course, the shapes, they have a belly like me, all in the lower carriage rather than in the chest, you know, unfortunately, getting older, I guess. In any case, so much information. So with the plates, it's no answers. It's just about the discovery, looking at it for the beauty of it. And that's all the best birders. It's about not knowing. It's about the question. And so the plates embrace that. And of course, one of my heroes, the spectacled eider, right? One till 20 odd years ago, where we knew where they wintered, right? So they got found in the Bering Sea between Alaska and the Soviet Union. So many of them in a lead of lice that the heat keeps the lead open. But they actually dive to 200 feet to get mollusks. I mean, isn't that damn incredible? And yes, I hate to say it, they really like the infrastructure. So the infrastructure's in the background. And of course, birds always share the outdoors with other animals, mammals and things like that. So my books always have that in there. And of course, the males are incredible. They're very actually hard to see. They come ashore late May, early June. A month later, they're gone. They have their evil way and they go back, all the males come back out to see and party at the blink of an eye. Boys are bad in the duck world. In any case, just so beautiful, right? And so the sea ducks are the one group of birds that are really struggling. Why? Because they are in the far north where nobody can really protect them. Ducks Unlimited don't really go up there. And so they're in trouble. But look at this image. I mean, aren't they the most incredible thing? But it's all about the question again. So why do they have black around their eyes? What do you reckon? Think of baseball players at night. What do they do at night? They put black around their eyes. So most of the year they're in the ice. So I'm assuming it's for to stop the reflection. So none of them don't have black around the eye. And then even that, look under the chin, look at the king hydra at the back with the black under there. Same things to stop the reflection of the light, I assume. Okay, and what's interesting, if you look at common hydras, the common hydras in the southern part of the range don't have it, but the very northern common hydras do have that black under the chin. So it's really fascinating. So that's not research, that's just thinking, and that's the just the fun of it, right? But then look at these bills. I mean, how do you not marvel at those, and the pom-poms on the head. So just incredible beasts. And so put lots of mystery photos in the waterfowl guide, see them from all angles, often flying over, right? And of course, these are all the males. Wrong. Most of these are actually females. So a lot of females, as they get older, the hormone levels change and they actually take on the bright default colors of the male. And so these are actually, most of these are known adult females, old adult females. So again, fascinating. So if you look around, I dare say, if you look at 1,000 mallards, you're going to find one mallard that has some male features, but if you look at the bill, it'll have a female tag, and that will be an older adult female mallard. So really interesting. And so in any case, I started to set off back and down the Dalton Highway, and then I forgot what it's called, the Yukon Highway, just 1,000 miles or whatever, hardly anybody. You come across hot springs like this, middle of the day, nobody there, absolutely beautiful. Village of the Signs, just, this is a tiny part of it in the middle of nowhere, just incredible. So traveling is the greatest thing in the world. Then the more remote you get, the more interesting it gets. My two girls were told they did not have to go to university, but they had to travel the world. Best education you can get. And so today, I'm often asked, what is the state of birding in North America? Well, for me, is it gloomy or is it great? For me, I think birding's fantastic in North America. I think there's some things we need to change, but we can change them. North America has saved so much land, but we don't do a great job of managing it, and we do a terrible, terrible job of connecting people to nature. We have to do a much better job. We have to learn from the rest of the world. Conservation comes with numbers, and if people fight for it, then you can save it. Okay, so it's really key that we do that. And then one of the biggest things is conservation is tomorrow. Today is about the youth. We must get more young birders into birding. The greatest thing that's happened in the last 10, 15 years is the proliferation of young birders. And 15 years ago, there were barely any. Now there are loads. I have one guy who spent the last 3 falls at my house, helps with books, keeps me straight. He's brilliant. He's 18 years old. Right now, he's been living in his car, sleeping in his beach for the last 6 weeks off Cape Hatteras. He doesn't want to do anything else but go birding, which I love. Okay, so he gets out of his truck in the morning, birds all day. And of course, he's at Cape Hatteras and he's rewriting the birding map there because nobody goes birding properly there. Okay, so he sea watches all day. So people like Daniel Irons are the game changers of tomorrow. So as long as they know what the important messages are, which hopefully he does, and he's a role model, because when I was a young kid, I looked at people like Daniel Irons. He's hardcore. I wanted to be like him. And so, these are the guys that we have to promote, and because they are the game changers of tomorrow. So I think with them and all the technology, everybody's getting hooked in with cameras, beginners, non-birders. So I really feel like we're going to do a better job of connecting people to nature. Webcams, things like that, and iPhones. We have to embrace them. Old schoolers like me find that a little hard. I'm a traditionalist, but we have to accept what life is today. So I think conservation in North America is going to be great. We need to move it a little quicker. We need to understand a bit better, but I think it's exciting times. And so to me, this sort of conservation in America. So look out of every window, look for peace, look for love, look for good things, look for moose. But who's the daft bastard who put dumpsters for park use only, right? So if we can stop that person, we're going to be in good shape. Yes, he's a government employee, and actually conservation in America is left wing. In Europe, it's right wing, and it's a lot bigger. So that's actually quite interesting. So, you know, we have to make money for conservation, unfortunately. And so birds are everywhere. Waterfowl, fantastic. The book's been out 2 or 3 years now. You can buy it off Crossley Books, as you can with the Western Guide, which you got the first dabs. That's the first announcement that we should be coming in probably Friday. We'll get the books probably Friday, and also Ornithotherapy for your mind, body, and soul. So we hope Ornithotherapy will really, really connect more people first to the back garden, because birding always begins in the back garden, and then to the park down the road, and then to the beautiful Colorado Rockies, you know, to the rivers and going further afield. But it's that massive base that is key, and then it's like a pyramid to the really crazy ones like dandelion. So, okay.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much. We have some questions for you. And we would be, any of you that are watching have any other questions, be sure to type them in the question and answer function at the below the bottom of your screen there. And I will forward them on to Richard. Richard, we had one person who was involved in a wildlife rehabilitation. And she says on more than one mallard, female mallard in her experience, had to be put down because of abuse by the males, top of the head missing, blindness. You had mentioned that the female mallard was in control. So how do you figure that?
Well, that's a well, I haven't heard that one, but that's a great question. So it's quite well known, and they do use a word that I don't like the use of that word beginning with R in it when you look online. But the female is able to change the shape of her internal parts to accept the male member without getting into the details. So she is actually able to control which one, I guess you would say, inseminates her, you know, and then she does actually run off. That's the first time I've seen that. If you actually watch mallards, though, their courtship, it is bobbing, male and female, and it is a reciprocal thing. It's not usually violent. And so that's a new one.
Okay.
Great question. Great question.
Okay.
If it was a question, a statement, really.
Okay. Then there's another question about this person had trouble finding your waterfowl guide. She said she's been looking for 3 months and wondered how she could get it.
So you go to crossleybooks.com. We did on Amazon, and we had a problem with Amazon. I was told because it was COVID, and I know it's a long story. So it was not on Amazon for a short while. But it should be around. It should be around Crossley Books. You come to Crossley Books, that's the best place, and then we always sign the books that go out of here.
Okay. Another question, do we understand you to say that oil industry infrastructure is helpful or good for the bird life in Prudhoe Bay? If so, why?
No, I'm not saying it's helpful, but I'm not saying it's negative. We have to get a balance. So, you know, the destruction of all the great lands up in Alaska can never happen. But ultimately, anything we do for energy is terrible, okay? Wind is terrible. It's terrible. I mean, most energy is terrible. So we have to pick our poison, so to speak, unfortunately. You know, best thing is we reduce, you know, our carbon footprint on so much, right? But ultimately, there is a price when it comes to energy, and we're just going to have to pick our poison. Having talked to a lot of people, nuclear would seem to be the most environmentally friendly. And I would say wind, definitely not. Wave also is a problem. That the more you look into things, and unfortunately, I've looked into it a lot with some people who really, really know, and some of the answers are a little not good. And even solar, which I love, the problem is with solar is getting rid of all the solar panels, and that in itself is going to be a disaster unless we really make some big improvements. The biggest problem is, in my opinion, is the people who are driving this, the people are doing it for profit, simply for profit. And we somehow need to be careful. So it's like with the wind thing, fragmentation and all this is really bad, but they did a great job of creating a message of it being environmentally friendly. And that's one, having looked at it, I just don't agree. That was just a great marketing job as far as I'm concerned. And so we have to be careful, and we need to do more due diligence and find out what is the best way. I do not advocate any as being the best because I'm not informed enough, but it's very important that we get groups of people who are really, really knowledgeable and who have the best interests of the environment and other things in mind, and really we need to work out what is the best thing and not let it be driven by the dollar.
Okay. Will the ornithotherapy book be available on Friday also?
Friday, yeah, hopefully. Listen, the ships are stuck off Los Angeles for weeks because of COVID. So it's been sitting there for a couple of weeks, but I was told 3 hours ago that they're definitely going to be in the warehouse tomorrow, and they're telling me I can get them the day after, but it depends on shipping. But yes, in the next 3-4 days, but they're home. I'm not bringing them myself, but in the next 3 or 4 days, it will be available. Yes. Okay. Let's say Monday at the latest.
Okay. Question: if I'm doing a self-guided birding trip, say to northern Colorado, what's the best approach? Count species, write about habitat. How do I get the most out of it? I'm a novice.
Brilliant question. That's the ultimate question for me. First off, do not try and name birds, and do not try and do lists. It will destroy you, okay? So the first thing is to just look at birds and watch them. We used to say that unless you watch it for 3 hours, you're not watching it. It's like trying to spend 5 minutes with me and knowing who I am. There's not a chance that's going to happen. So it's just go and enjoy it. But whatever you see, sit down. One of the biggest things we're talking about now is being in the moment, excluding everything else, and just finding a subject. And it's a piece of a puzzle. Think of a bird as 30, 40, 50 pieces. The longer you do it, for a really good bird, it's 100 pieces, So just train yourself to see more and more. The more you look, the more you'll ask questions. The more questions you ask, the more rewarding it will be. If I go to a place like Costa Rica for a couple of weeks, it's useless to me. It's just so overwhelming. All I want to do is look at a few species. And that's all the best birders. They're the best because they focus in the moment. They really study things, and you will get much more out of it. And then as time goes by, you will really learn the birds, and then you become a really top birder then.
Okay.
So I will say this, listen, everybody's into lists over here now because of eBird. We have to be really careful with this. We're on thin ice. Counting birds for conservation is great, but if we're counting, we're not really looking at birds, okay? And so it's like today, I'm out looking at birds, finding a new migration site, but it's like they're so fixated in the moment. It's very hard to count birds and really study the birds. You can't do both things properly. And I think I'm hearing so many comments from people who are beginning bird watchers who say, I'm not like you. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, you just want to go out and create lists and count birds. I want to look at them and really understand them and appreciate them. Well, that's me. I'm not a counter. And I'm not even a photographer. I'm a studier of birds. And that's what gives me, I've done it all, but that's what gives me the most enjoyment is just learning things. So I encourage people to do that and take field notes.
You've spoken very highly of Ducks Unlimited, and we had a representative, a biologist from Ducks Unlimited, speak to us last year. And he was very interesting in pointing out what good work they're doing for not only waterfowl, but other species as well. And so I'm just glad, and that's on our archives now. And incidentally, if people want to go back and go to our website, dfobirds.org, and it was last year, January of last year's program.
Let me just say this, Bill. When you go to duck, so I've been to lots of hunting festivals, and people never talk about shooting birds. They talk about saving wetlands. Birders, we don't talk like that. We go on eBird and its front page is all about lists and who's the biggest list. Counting birds should be about conservation and how we use these numbers to conserve birds. That should be all over the front page. We need to learn that from Ducks Unlimited and others, that the most important thing for counting birds is to conserve them, and we should be talking more about, first and foremost, about conservation successes that counting birds helps. You know, it's not about having the biggest bloody list, you know.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, and we can also support them by buying duck stamps. Even though may not be hunters, it's still preserving the habitat. So that's a way that we can all participate in supporting an organization like that and a cause like that. Well, that looks like the questions that we've had. Richard, thank you so much for a most interesting program. Did you want to mention again how people can obtain your books from these wonderful plates that we've seen?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so if you go to crossleybooks.com, you can get Waterfowl. These are all 3 sub-published. Waterfowl Guide, the Western Guide's just coming out, and Ornithotherapy for your mind, body, and soul just coming out. So they will all be available. They will all be signed. Amazon will have them, I'm sure, but the pricing is just the same and they're not signed, okay? I think we're actually the Crossley books, I keep them a bit cheaper than Amazon. So, you know, we hope with the Ornithotherapy Guide, and the Western Guide, the books are designed for everybody, kids, you know, beginners, you know, and actually with the Western Guide, I have actually said it's for beginners and intermediate birders. And the reason is, what we've found out is really expert birders, they can fill in all the holes that those other birders cannot. And so they can look at a side-on white background, you know, and they know the habitats and the behaviors, so they don't need that information. And so we've got to change that. So my books have that. And so it's really the complete picture for beginners and intermediate birders, where you can actually practice and understand what you're looking at. And so the books, I hope nobody will ever compare it with Peterson or Sibley or Nat Geo, because they're just completely different kinds of books with different goals. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, for a most interesting talk and your perspectives and a report on a very interesting trip. Thank you so much. And before, I'd also like to acknowledge, Dave, I'd like to acknowledge your involvement in getting Richard as a speaker for us. Thank you for all you've done to make that happen.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Bill. Richard, if you'd be so kind as to unshare your screen, I could show a couple slides of your book pictures.
There you go.
Okay, great. Great. There we go. And if you have any comments you'd like to make, you said a lot. I've got your crossleybooks.com for your
I just think, my message is different. And, it's ironically what most people don't know. They see me a different way to what I probably am, but 15 years ago, nobody knew me, in part because for 15 years I had hidden. I wouldn't speak to the media or anything like that. I became quite well known when I first came to America for finding the dike in Cape May and all the warblers flying over. It became the thing. But then I disappeared for 15 years. But the reason to come out of the closet, so to speak, is really to change things and try and make it birding and conservation better over here. And just because I've traveled all over the world and being English, so I just think we can learn things from others, and we need to make birding literally 10 times bigger than what it is. For conservation reasons and for what we now know is wellness, you know. So I say things that are often very controversial and not popular. And if I come onto the scene to say things that were the same as everybody else, I would have kept birding, and there would have been no point to come out of the closet, you know.
Sure.
And so a lot of my friends in the 80s went on to be real game changers, you know, I mean, real game changers around the world. So, and, you know, I don't think it's any coincidence, you know, Mike Parr, American Bird Conservancy, we were just brought up in a different scene, not even a different era, but a different scene where, you know, conservation and connecting to people was just so important. And when you get it as a youngster, you're prepared to die for it, literally. And, you know, so really it's just trying to like get others to think a bit the same way so that we can, you know, there's nothing I've done that's new. It's just copying from others, you know, and hopefully, you know, getting birding a lot bigger in this country than what it is, you know.
Sure. Well, you've sure done a wonderful job. I won't belabor, but you know, your photos or the plates are just beyond compare. They're just totally awesome. Those that you've shown us, it was so wonderful. I clipped this off the your website, your ornithotherapy, your new book coming shortly, and here's a copy of the cover, evidently.
Yes, it's ornithotherapy.com is the website. It's a different website, ornithotherapy.com, where you can read more about ornithotherapy. And, you know, that's really for, you know, for the question before, for the woman who said she was going to travel, what should she do? She's a beginner. You know, I think this book will really help her to, it's really designed for, where Holly Merker wrote it, so she's the brains behind it, okay? And as I said, my daughter, who is very much into mindfulness, she likes nature. So a lot of it is really being more in the moment, you know, but to be in the moment, it helps if you know how to look at things and question them and really understand what you're looking at. So it really emphasizes that. And it really takes it to a couple of levels that no other book has done before. And so I really hope it connects to everybody. It's not really written for hardcore. It's not written for serious birders. This is written for somebody who wants to get into nature, or somebody who's just considers themselves a beginning birder, or somebody who's an intermediate who wants to look at themselves and nature a little differently and understand its benefits. But it was inspired by COVID. And as you can probably tell, because I'm rabbiting on a lot about it, I'm really, really excited about it. And I just hope, you know, it connects to a much broader audience. You know, it's an extension of my other guides, but it just goes, it's more helpful. You know, it gets down to some more basics than my books are allowed to do, just because of the scale of them.
Well, birding is such an emotional hobby. It's just so wonderful. Anyway, it's bound to be a hit. I can't wait to see it and read it. And perhaps even Holly might be able to do a workshop with us this fall. I don't know. We'll work.
Holly, get in here.
Well,
Richard, before we go, there were some people that mentioned that they've tried CrossleyBooks.com and they're getting referred to Amazon.
There shouldn't be. We'll have to change that. I'll change. Yeah. Give me 24 hours. I apologize.
Okay.
So this is Holly. Holly's just arrived here. So because the books are coming out, she's just driven from Pennsylvania. So we're going to be promoting the books. But so Holly will, I'm sure Holly will, if you talk to her nicely, she'll do a talk for you, you know, on ornithotherapy, right?
Yeah. That'd be
Colorado Field Ornithologists. I think it's in September. I don't know the exact date though.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, that was a wonderful presentation, Richard, and we thank you very much. And there's obviously a delightful ongoing theme of wonderment and enthusiasm that you have in your life. And it was wonderful of you to share that with us tonight. We're very much appreciative of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Listen, it's you live in an absolutely stunning part of the world. So I've just come to live somewhere that's a little, you know, with the mountains and the different habitats. So if you're from Colorado, I'm very jealous. Very jealous. You live in such a, I've been to Colorado many times, just spectacular place. So, and lots of the backgrounds in the Western Guide and actually in the Waterfowl Guide are actually from Colorado. So
wonderful. Well, that's our program for tonight, a video of which will be available on DFO's website, again, for just a week. And I want to thank you very much, everyone, for attending tonight. Please take care of yourself and each other. Stay safe and well, and good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.